Welcome to a special edition of ENSCO INSIGHTS, live from Space Week in Orlando, Florida, where industry leaders and innovators converge at SpaceCom and Space Congress. Much like ENSCO INSIGHTS, Space Week explores the latest advancements in space technology, including spaceports, launch vehicles, and the evolving landscape of space mobility. So it's only natural that we would be here. Hi, I'm your host, Brooke Brown. Have many of you seen one of the Virgin Galactic space launches? If you have, then you've probably seen Spaceport America, the world's first purpose-built commercial spaceport that has set some of the standards for what it takes to access space. To learn more about the successes and challenges of running this unique spaceport, we are being joined by Scott McLaughlin, Executive Director of Spaceport America. He brings a wealth of experience to the table and is known for driving innovation and economic development in New Mexico, where the Spaceport America is located. Welcome, Scott.
I'm glad to be here, Brooke.
Thanks for making time for us today. Before we get into the interview, what do you think of SpaceCom and Space Week so far?
Well, this is great. I mean, getting these many people together in the right place at the right time, it's really important for all of us out there in the commercial space industry to be able to have this kind of interaction.
Virgin Galactic made big news launching and landing at Spaceport America. Let's talk about what you see as the future of suborbital spaceflight. Do you see commercial suborbital spaceflight as a growing market? And if so, why?
There's a couple of parts to suborbital flight. One is just testing hardware. If you look at any of the launch providers, they all had to do suborbital flights before they could do orbital flights. In fact, if you look at SpaceX, that was what they had to do originally. Everybody has to do that, right? And then once you get your rocket running well, you've got to do payloads. You hopefully develop a market for taking payloads up and testing them. And then Virgin Galactic's gone another step, and they're taking passengers up for the first time on a regular basis. And that's a huge change to be able to build a vehicle that is going to be safe to take what will be the new vehicle coming in this summer, 6 people at a time to go to space suborbitally and come down. The suborbital flights are always going to be important because, again, you got to test the hardware. And for passengers, just the idea of having that experience of being able to see the curvature of the Earth and being 60 miles above the Earth.
What does Spaceport America need to do to capture that market?
So Spaceport America is an interesting place because actually even in a way goes back to the 60s. So when the Apollo program got started, there were a lot of places vying for the headquarters of NASA, the mission control of NASA, and where a capsule would land. And if a capsule landed on land, a good place could be New Mexico. But of course, the capsule wound up landing on the ocean. But even in the 90s, so way back in 1980s, there's something called the Commercial Space Launch Act that was passed by Congress, and that allowed for the first time for there to be commercial space. Up until then, everything was either government, federal for DoD, or government for civil. But the Commercial Space Launch Act allowed for there to be commercial companies. So it allowed for SpaceX to exist and build a rocket. Up until then, you and I, if we wanted to start a company, we wouldn't have been allowed to do that on our own because it was against the law to build your own rockets, right, to go to orbit or to, it's like building an ICBM. But at the same time, that also created room for commercial spaceports. So we're not the first commercial spaceport in the country. I think maybe Mojave got their license before us, and I think maybe Oklahoma did, but we're the first one that was purpose-built. We were designed from the ground up to be a spaceport, and we did that in conjunction with Virgin Galactic. But we have 18,000 acres, so we have a horizontal launch area, we have a vertical launch area, and we have even an advanced technology area that we are trying to attract customers to.
Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket launches from their own private spaceport in Texas. What advantages do you offer rocket companies to launch at your spaceport as opposed to building their own? So
that's a really good question. So technically, the Blue Origin site is not really a spaceport in the sense that most people use that word. What the FAA calls it is a private launch facility. So they have a license that actually surrounds the New Shepard launch vehicle, and it can launch from that location but the area around it, is, like you said, is private. Whereas Spaceport America, we actually have a launch operator license from the FAA, and so we can do multi-vendor. So once we get the license, like we have for Virgin Galactic, we can do Virgin Galactic. We have a company called Up Aerospace from Colorado that does launches. We've done Exos. They're from Texas. And anybody else that wants to come there for vertical or horizontal launch, they still have to get a vehicle license to launch, but our spaceport license encompasses our whole area there. So there's a difference there. Like Boca Chica, the site for SpaceX in Texas, is also a private launch facility. So they don't have a license so much for the area as they do for the Starship itself.
I see. What other challenges do you face and what other opportunities do you see moving forward in the suborbital space market?
So our goal is eventually to be orbital, right? And there's been a lot of conversation more and more every year, but this year in some of the sessions I've been in about what's the Space Coast going to do? What is the Space Force going to do about the increased tempo? I think the launch cadence right now is about a launch every 3 days. So while Spaceport America is a suborbital facility for the most part, our license allows us to launch orbitally. What we need is a vehicle provider, a launch provider, to design their vehicle to be a little bit safer, to have a simple termination, maybe a controlled termination and landing, precision landing, if it can make it to orbit, maybe to have a parachute. So again, while we're suborbital right now with Virgin Galactic and our other customers, we're working toward finding a customer and working with maybe the federal government into developing ourselves into an orbital launch facility, and that would take some of the pressure off the coastal sites, which are having a very continuous cadence of launches, but also have some issues. Like there's going to be a maximum number of launches that can come from the Cape, or a maximum number of launches that come from Virginia Space and Wallops Island. Anyway, and we're also working on a reentry license, an orbital reentry license. We're just like I said, going back to the 60s, we're actually still a really good place for reentry for either something like the Sierra Space Dream Chaser vehicle or a capsule.
Spaceport America is a state-owned spaceport, correct?
That's correct.
What kind of economic impact has Spaceport America brought to New Mexico?
So our economic impact, we did an economic impact study in 2022, and we're working on one for 2023 right now. But what we showed back in 2022 is we brought in about $60 million of new money to the state. So that's money that would not have been there without us, and about 811 jobs. And so, and that's without Virgin Galactic flying regularly. And since then, although Virgin Galactic's cut back a little while they're working on their 2 new spaceships, we expect that to go up. And in 2025, 2026, we should have that economic impact and more. As we work toward orbital and bringing in more customers, we hope to get to somewhere around 1,000 to 2,000 jobs that are attributable to the spaceport. So that's our main economic impact, is jobs and bringing in money into the state. But if I can go on a little bit further, if you look at that corridor from Albuquerque all the way down to El Paso, we're now calling that Space Valley. Obviously, it's a play off of Silicon Valley, but what we're trying to do is work with all the people that are involved in space, all the way from Los Alamos, New Mexico, Los Alamos National Laboratories, and then there's laboratories in Albuquerque, Sandia Labs. There's a lot of aerospace activity in Albuquerque, and then a lot of stuff is going on in El Paso. So Spaceport brings it together because you can go to space. You can't go to space without a spaceport. So we're uniquely positioned to grow that whole region. And so when you talk about the economic activity or economic impact, what we're hoping and what we're trying to be is a catalyst, not just for the spaceport itself, but for that whole region.
Wow. In talking with other spaceport directors like Robert Long from Space Florida, getting enough trained aerospace workers can be both a challenge and opportunity. What role has your spaceport taken in developing a skilled aerospace workforce in New Mexico?
So it is challenging, and right now, because Rob Long and the folks in Wallops and Vandenberg, they have the benefit of literally billions of dollars in federal money having been put into their facilities that go all the way back to the 60s, where, like you said, our facility has been built by the state of New Mexico entirely. They and because of that, and because they're on the coast, they have a tremendous amount of activity. Although if you go back just a few years ago, a solid year at the Cape was maybe 10 or 11 launches. And like I said, now they're doing 11, they're doing one every 2 or 3 days. So we're not to the cadence where we need that kind of workforce yet. Virgin Galactic, again, they will staff up here pretty soon to get to regular suborbital flights. In fact, their plans are with 2 spaceships to fly approximately twice a week or more. So I think their cadence with the 2 spaceships and the 1 carrier aircraft will be about 125 flights a year. And so their workforce requirement is going to go up. But with our other customers there, a lot of them come and go. And because of that, we don't have as much of a permanent workforce. But I am focused on we work with the universities, and we do a lot of STEM outreach at the high school level. So we're focused on trying to build up the capability to draw that workforce as we increase the number of our customers, and especially the tenants who rent from us permanently.
Can you tell us more about what other innovations or commercial partnerships are going on at Spaceport America?
So another way to look at it is like a giant test range, because we're, unlike a lot of the spaceports, we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's actually an hour from Las Cruces, where I live. But we're also right next to White Sands Missile Range, which is the largest testing facility, DoD testing facility in the country. And because of that thing I talked about, the Commercial Space Launch Act, part of that allows us to cooperate directly with White Sands Missile Range, U.S. Army White Sands Missile Range, to access their airspace. We can even access their radar. It's for a fee. Our customers can get to the radar, get to telemetry, monitoring, optics, and meteorology. So where the innovation that occurs on site is working with White Sands and building up that general area, so we can act as both a test range. So we have high altitude platform system UAVs. These are large UAVs that fly. We do rocket engine testing, and then we do the Virgin Galactic flights and other suborbital flights.
In addition to Virgin Galactic, Spin Launch has conducted flight tests of its unique suborbital accelerator from New Mexico at Spaceport America. How did that come about?
So part of the reason it came about is because New Mexico moved very quickly to capture Spin Launch when they were looking for a place to operate. They had such a unique, kinetic launch system, and they wanted to move quickly. So Spaceport America was able to move quickly. And that's, again, the benefit of having that spaceport license and having done an environmental impact statement that we've already done. So when a customer comes to us, hopefully we're already well covered in terms of the environmental impacts and other things. But so Spin Launch was a meeting at a conference like this. I think this is just a few months before I got there. And then things moved very quickly so they could build their kinetic launch system. Which is suborbital, by the way. They're very interested in building an orbital one, and I think they're still looking for a site either on the equator or somewhere up north for a polar trajectory, and that would be 3 times the size of the system they built at Spaceport America.
When Robert Long was on Insights, he discussed how Space Florida had partnership programs with NASA, several universities, and even some high school programs. And as you already mentioned before, you do have some collaborations happening there. Does Spaceport America specifically have any research and development programs, incubators, or partnerships with universities that you'd like to elaborate about?
So we haven't developed a lot of formal programs. Again, Robert Long, he's got the benefit of literally decades and decades of operations here, and a lot of that, almost all of it was federal money. Now most of it's private money, right? So we're developing those partnerships, but New Mexico is a small state. So a lot of my partnerships come from literally just making a phone call to the president of New Mexico State University or other universities, or if I need to talk to the governor's office, it's something I can do very quickly and easily. So we've also worked with other economic development agencies, EDOs, organizations that are both in El Paso, Las Cruces, and then working with the high schools. So that's the benefit of being in a small state is everybody kind of knows each other. Then we're working quickly to have those partnerships up and running. So if we bring in either a new program or we bring in some new customers, we can fulfill what needs to happen.
We need to take a short break, but we will be right back with more with Scott McLaughlin, Executive Director of Spaceport America. And when we return, we'll learn what he sees as the role of spaceports in the future of space exploration. So don't go away.
Long before liftoff and beyond, one team has set our trajectory for assured access to space.
Engines throttling up.
By taking ideas
Go and throttle up.
to reality. We are ENSCO, Aerospace Engineering.
Welcome back to a special edition of ENSCO Insights. We are here at SpaceCom talking with Scott McLaughlin, the Executive Director of Spaceport America. Scott, space debris has been a big topic on several of our Insights shows. Sustainability is a big concern both in space and here on the ground. Obviously, spin launch with no rocket engines has greatly reduced impact to the environment. Is environmental footprint a concern at Spaceport America? And if so, what steps are you taking to minimize it?
So, we're trying to be as green a facility as we can. And so we actually are looking at a big chunk of land, even to put in solar panels, so we could maybe be a completely green facility. That might include batteries. We're not going to do wind energy out there. But as far as our customers, we all believe in a sustainable type ecosystem operating. But when you're talking about companies that are early stage, they're not going to worry as much about that sort of thing until they're kind of up and running. They make their business case, their business model closes, and then they can start focusing that way. We've talked to some customers about green rocket fuels. But if those are more expensive than what is accepted and used, then they can't make a business case for that. So it's something we're always paying attention to, and we're trying to help our customers and help ourselves fulfill, but it may not be something that is going to happen right away.
Las Vegas was approved in the last couple of years as a spaceport, and there seems to be more spaceports every day. Do you see this as increased competition or just a growing industry, and why?
Well, it's hard not to look at it as competition. A lot of us smaller spaceports is kind of a scrappy business, right? Where we're looking to find new customers to close our own business case. We're taxpayer funded in our genesis of the capital improvements that were made to build the spaceport. And also in terms of some of our operating expenses are still paid for by the state of New Mexico, but that we pay that back in terms of the jobs and the economic impact. But you're right, there a lot of states, a lot of regions are trying to build a spaceport. And I think for those of us who already exist, we're worried about a dilution of the market. And so none of us succeed well, potentially, as a small spaceport. But the other side of that coin is every single spaceport is very different. If you go and look at the commercial spaceports that exist, you'll see that they all have their own different attributes. And so if you're a rocket developer or horizontal launch developer, you're probably going to pick one of those that best fits you. And you probably wouldn't have picked Spaceport America anyway. So in that sense, we aren't as competitive because our attributes are so different. But I do worry that the desire to build spaceports could outrun the number of customers that all of us spaceports have. But that's market forces at work, right? Our job is to be more attractive then and to make sure we entice those customers to come to New Mexico.
Where do you think we will see the most growth for commercial spaceports? Supporting human spaceflight, developing new space technologies, or expanding access to space? And why?
I would go more with expanding access to space, but that almost sounds like a not a good answer because what does it mean, right? But I think as the price to go to space keeps dropping because of our ability to build reusable rockets, and develop that cadence where things become really a lot more efficient. I think what's going to happen, for example, might be AI. So think about AI. If you're paying attention to AI, you'll see that it uses a tremendous amount of energy. It is not, as much as we love to use AI, it's not a very green technology because of the amount of electricity it's using. Well, what would happen if we put the data servers in space with giant solar panels? Then it wouldn't be an issue. But how are you going to get that many solar panels to space? How are you going to get the data server farm into space? So I think the future of Spaceport is everything you just said. But I think there's a lot of applications where getting to space, because it just becomes cheaper, we discover new things to do in space, like manufacturing drugs, manufacturing materials, and like I said, maybe data server farms, maybe, and obviously maybe some more space tourism. But all of a sudden, the ability to do that safely from an inland spaceport is going to be really important, especially for what I would call asynchronous launches. So if you've got a whole bunch of solar panels that need to go to space, you're going to have to meet up with your rendezvous point for the space station or whatever it's going to go to. But it could go today, it could go tomorrow, it could go next week. It's far different than some of the national defense missions or something that have to go at a very specific time. So I think inland spaceports will eventually play a major role in just opening up access to space. And what's the second word of a spaceport is port. So just like the port at an ocean or an airport, we become just a transportation hub. Getting to space quickly, efficiently. So that's what I see as kind of our future, maybe in 5 to 10, 15 years out.
So kind of going off of that, 50 years from now, when we open a history book, and my hope is that we still have the book, where do you think Spaceport America will be listed in the history of space exploration?
Well, as the executive director, I can only give you one answer, which would be, very prominently listed as one of the most important commercial spaceports that was established in the country. And in 50 years, I'd like to think we'd be a major part of the ecosystem and logistics chain for getting to space and back from space. So that's my goal. That's the goal of my staff and a lot of people in New Mexico. That's where I'd like to see us in 50 years.
Thank you for making the time for us today here at SpaceCom and giving us a better understanding of Spaceport America. We wish you continued success. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Brooke, and thank ENSCO. That's very good. Welcome to a special edition of ENSCO INSIGHTS, live from Space Week in Orlando, Florida. I heard him say stop. Okay.